5 places infested with witchcraft. You say old Eviode, imagine walking into a place that feels heavy the moment you step inside. The air is thick, not because of the weather, but because something unseen clings to it. Your heart beats faster, your skin tingles, and you cannot explain why. Deep inside you know this place carries darkness. Now, pause and ask yourself, if our Creator has filled this world with light, why do some choose to embrace the shadows? Why do people open their hearts and homes to forces that pull them away from peace, mercy, and protection? My friends, witchcraft is not a myth of the past. It is not just a tale whispered around campfires or a chapter in some ancient book. It is a real force that thrives on fear, deception, and destruction. People underestimate it, mock it, or even get curious about it. But let me tell you, this curiosity with darkness is a dangerous game. What may begin as just exploring can end with doors open to forces you can't control. There are places in this world where witchcraft has rooted itself deeply. Places where rituals are carried out, where prayers to the Almighty are replaced with chants to the unseen, and where energy is twisted to manipulate, harm, and enslave souls. Visiting such places is not harmless tourism. Being in those environments weakens your spiritual shield, making you vulnerable to whispers, temptations, and dangers beyond what your eyes can see. You see, we must be alert. Just as you wouldn't knowingly walk into a burning building, you must not step into spaces consumed by witchcraft. They burn not with fire, but with an energy that seeks to scorch your spirit. Protecting your soul is far more important than satisfying your curiosity. And today, I will share with 5 such places you must avoid at all costs. Houses of ritual sacrifice are among the most dangerous places a person can ever encounter, because they are built upon practices that directly rebel against the divine order. These are not ordinary houses or spaces, but locations where human fear and desperation have been exploited to make offerings to forces that thrive on darkness. Within their walls, chants replace prayer, blood replaces peace, and the energy that lingers there carries the weight of suffering. Even when abandoned, these places do not lose their power easily. The atmosphere becomes heavy because the actions that took place there continue to echo in the unseen realm, leaving behind a spiritual stain that affects anyone who enters. The danger lies not only in the physical structures, but in the invisible chains that such places create around the soul of those who step inside. People are often drawn to these places out of curiosity, treating them as mysteries or legends. But what they fail to understand is that houses of ritual sacrifice are not museums of history, they are wounds in the spiritual landscape. Every drop of blood spilled, every chant uttered, and every act committed against the natural order of God leaves an imprint that cannot be washed away by time. These imprints do not fade like paint on the walls, they cling to the very air, seeping into the ground and radiating a presence that unsettles even those who do not believe in such things. A person walking into such a house may not see spirits with their eyes, but they will feel the unease pressing against their heart, the sudden shiver running down their spine, and the restless energy that lingers even after they leave. The greatest danger is spiritual contamination. Being present in such a place weakens your shield of protection, because the energies there are designed to erode faith and open cracks in the human heart where whispers of temptation can creep in. It is not uncommon for those who expose themselves to such spaces to suffer from nightmares, anxiety, or even an unexplainable heaviness that follows them. The darkness does not end at the doorstep, it kens and follows, feeding on the weakness of curiosity and disbelief. That is why these houses must be avoided completely, because what appears to be just an abandoned structure can in reality be a trap woven by unseen hands to capture the strength of your soul. Abandoned temples and shrines are places that carry an aura of mystery and fascination, but beneath their crumbling walls and faded symbols often lies a darkness that many fail to recognize. Once upon a time, these structures may have been raised for worship, for reverence, or for honor in gods and idols that people believed in. But when they fall into abandonment, they do not simply lose their power. Instead, they often become breeding grounds for witchcraft, occult practices that feed off the lingering spiritual energy. What was once a place of devotion transforms into a sanctuary for forces that thrive in secrecy and shadows. The silence that surrounds them is not the silence of peace, but of something unsettled, something waiting to be disturbed. Those who walk into these ruins might see only broken stones and forgotten carvings, yet in the unseen world, those places are still active, still claimed, and still used for purposes far from holy. One of the most deceptive things about abandoned temples and shrines is the way they appear harmless, even inviting, to those who stumble upon them. Tourists see them as landmarks, explorers see them as adventures, and some seekers of the unusual see them as doors to hidden knowledge. But what they overlook is the fact that darkness feeds on neglect. When a place is left unguarded, when prayers cease and sacred words are no longer spoken within its walls, it becomes open to other voices, other chants, and other energies that desire to claim it. That vacuum of protection invites practices that corrupt and pollute the space, making it a hub for those who wish to manipulate unseen forces. The soil itself can become tainted, the air heavy with vibrations that confuse the mind and weaken the heart. Even when no ritual is actively being performed, abandoned temples and shrines remain dangerous because of the residual energy stored within them. Every act of witchcraft, every offering made, every chant whispered into the silence leaves behind traces that linger long after the practitioners are gone. These remnants do not fade easily, for spiritual energy clings much like smoke after fire. Anyone who steps inside may unknowingly expose themselves to this residue, carrying it home in the form of unease, disturbed sleep, or persistent heaviness of spirit. Some may brush it off as imagination, but the effects are real, and they are the consequence of coming too close to something that was never meant to be approached. There is also a hidden allure in these places that pulls people deeper than they intended to go. At first it may seem like curiosity, a desire to explore history or connect with ancient traditions, but often it is the subtle pull of unseen forces drawing the soul closer to danger. This is why countless cultures across the world have warned people against stepping into abandoned temples, cautioning that once a place is deserted, it belongs no longer to humans but to spirits seeking residence. To ignore that wisdom is to play with fire in the hope that it will not burn. Yet fire does not choose who it consumes, and neither does darkness. Forests used for dark gatherings carry a weight that cannot be measured by sight alone. To the casual wanderer, a forest may appear as nothing more than a serene place of nature, filled with the rustle of leaves, the call of birds, and the whisper of the wind through towering trees. Yet not every forest is innocent. Some of them are chosen deliberately as secret grounds for those who practice witchcraft and occult rituals. They prefer the cover of the trees, the silence of the night, and the hidden spaces where no watchful eyes can see. In those places, chants rise where prayers should, fires are lit not for warmth but for summoning, and the soil is stained with the weight of ceremonies that call upon forces not meant to be invited. The natural beauty of the forest becomes a mask hiding a deeper corruption, and those who stumble into such places without knowledge often walk into invisible traps set by the unseen. The choice of forests for such gatherings is no accident. The isolation provides secrecy, and the natural energy of the earth becomes something to be exploited. Dark practitioners believe that trees and nature can serve as conduits for their power, so they gather in clearings or hidden groves, using the environment as part of their rituals. Over time, the ground remembers. Just as holy places carry the blessing of prayers uttered within them, forests of hope gatherings absorb the energy of repeated ceremonies. The trees themselves seem to hold whispers in their bark, and the silence of the air feels heavier, almost oppressive, as though it is watching. People who enter without awareness may suddenly feel chills, disorientation, or the sense that they are not alone, because the very atmosphere has been marked. Even after the gatherings disperse, the effects remain. Energy does not simply vanish when the last fire is extinguished, it lingers, weaving itself into the soil, clinging to the branches, and echoing in the shadows. Anyone who walks through may feel their emotions shift for no reason, from calm to fear, from strength to weakness, because the environment is saturated with forces that were never meant for the human heart. It is not uncommon for animals to avoid such areas, for they sense what humans often deny. The absence of birdsong, the silence of creatures that should normally thrive, becomes its own warning sign, signaling that the place is no longer safe. The greatest danger of forests used for dark gatherings is the way they blur the line between the seen and the unseen. At night, when the moonlight barely filters through the canopy, these places become doorways where rituals attempt to bridge worlds. For those who enter unaware, the mind becomes vulnerable. Strange whispers may echo in the imagination, shadows may seem to move, and the sense of being watched grows unbearable. These are not illusions but reflections of the spiritual residue left behind, residue that attaches itself to the curious and the careless. One does not let go easily, for darkness feeds on attention and fear. Many stories across cultures speak of people who entered such forests out of curiosity or bravado, only to return changed, restless, disturbed, unable to find peace in their own homes. The gatherings may not always be visible, but the presence remains. Some forests become so well known for this that locals avoid them entirely after dusk, passing down warnings through generations. They know that the risk is not just physical but spiritual, and no moment of adventure is worth the cost. These forests are not simply parts of nature anymore. They have been claimed, tainted, and transformed into sanctuaries of darkness that disguise themselves in the beauty of trees and the illusion of stillness. Haunted graveyards are among the most chilling places where witchcraft and dark practices often take root. and their atmosphere alone tells a story that words struggle to capture. A graveyard is supposed to be a place of rest, a space where the departed are laid to sleep in dignity, where the living visit to remember, to pray, and to reflect. But when that sacred peace is disturbed, when the resting grounds of souls are turned into arenas for rituals and incantations, the graveyard transforms into something far more sinister. Haunted graveyards are not just places where people imagine shadows and fear the silence. They are environments where spiritual energies are manipulated, where the veil between the living and the dead is tampered with, and where darkness finds an anchor strong enough to last for generations. The soul itself carries the weight of countless lives once lived, and when corrupted by witchcraft, it becomes fertile ground for forces that thrive on sorrow, fear, and loss. The very reason graveyards are chosen for dark practices is tied to their essence. Death already marks these grounds as liminal spaces, thresholds between the seen and unseen. Witches and occultists believe that spirits can be summoned more easily in such locations, that the souls of the departed can be coerced, disturbed, or bound to serve purposes they were never meant to fulfill. The markers of memory, the gravestones, the mausoleums, the crosses or inscriptions, become symbols not of reverence, but of targets for desecration. Candles are lit not in prayer but in summoning. Offerings are left not for remembrance but for manipulation. What was meant to be holy becomes twisted, and the corruption seeps into the atmosphere, so deeply that anyone who enters begins to feel its effect almost immediately. For those who step into a haunted graveyard, the experience is never neutral. The silence feels heavier than in other places, pressing on the chest like a weight that cannot be shaken off. The air grows colder, even when the weather does not call for it, and shadows seem to move differently, as though responding to a rhythm that remains unseen. Many who have wandered into such graveyards at night describe feeling watched, as if unseen eyes are tracking every step. This sensation is not mere imagination, but the residue of rituals and dark gatherings that linger in the air like smoke after fire. Just as places of worship carry a sense of serenity, because of the prayers uttered within them, haunted graveyards radiate unease, because of the repeated violations of their sanctity. Animals often sense what humans choose to ignore. Stray dogs howl near such graveyards without reason, crows gather in unnatural numbers, and sometimes the natural growth of trees and grass seems stunted or distorted. The environment bears witness to what has been done there, and every root, every stone, every breeze seems to testify against the corruption it has absorbed. People who visit casually may laugh off the stories, but even the strongest skeptics cannot deny the strange heaviness that clings to them after stepping inside. Nightmares, feelings of being followed, sudden illness, or unexplained fear often strike those who expose themselves too long to such an environment, for the darkness does not confine itself to the graveyard, it attaches and follows. The greatest danger of haunted graveyards is not simply the fear they inspire, but the vulnerability they create in the human soul. When people enter these spaces, especially at night, they unknowingly lower their defenses. Their curiosity, their desire for thrill, or their disbelief makes them easy targets for forces that thrive on fear. Every frightened breath, every nervous glance, every racing heartbeat feeds the energy of the place, strengthening what lingers there. And once a person becomes entangled in that web, the impact is not easily shaken off. Dreams become disturbed, moods shift without reason, and sometimes the mind itself begins to spiral into confusion, unable to separate reality from the shadows planted deep within. Communities around the world have long understood this, which is why stories, warnings, and traditions about graveyards have been passed down for centuries. Elders caution against walking through them after dark, not merely because of superstition but because of lived experience. They know that these are not places to test bravery or satisfy curiosity. The veil between the worlds is thinnest here, and those who tamper with it invite consequences beyond imagination. In cultures where witchcraft thrives, haunted graveyards are sought after as powerful locations for rituals precisely because of the vulnerability they offer, and the danger they pose to anyone foolish enough to treat them lightly. Every haunted graveyard carries with it a history of the lives buried within, but also a hidden history of the rituals that may have been performed upon those graves. The ground remembers, the air remembers, and the spirits remember. What should have been a sanctuary of rest becomes instead a battlefield of forces unseen, and those who cross its boundaries without understanding step into a place where darkness does not sleep, where silence is not peace, and where the past is never truly buried. Markets of the occult are among the most deceptive and dangerous places a person can enter, for they are disguised not as grounds of ritual but as spaces of trade and curiosity. At first glance, they may appear like any other market: crowded stalls, voices calling out, colorful displays meant to catch the eye. Yet beneath the surface, these markets are unlike ordinary bazaars. They thrive on objects, charms, potions and symbols that are tied not to life, light, or healing but to darkness, control, and manipulation. Every item on display carries an unseen weight, every trinket is more than what it seems, and every sale is more than a simple exchange of goods. What is being traded in such places is not merely material. It is spiritual, and the consequences of even a single careless purchase can follow a person far beyond the walls of the market. The danger of these markets lies in their subtlety. Unlike haunted graveyards or forests of dark gatherings, which often instill immediate fear, markets of the occult can feel almost inviting. They attract people with curiosity, offering an air of mystery, adventure, and the promise of hidden knowledge. Travelers may pass through them unaware, fascinated by the exotic nature of what they see. Bottles filled with strange liquids, amulets carved with unfamiliar symbols, powders and herbs with whispered promises of love, protection, or wealth. Some may even purchase these items as souvenirs, dismissing them as harmless artifacts of culture or tradition. But what they do not realize is that these objects are often charged with spiritual energy, created through rituals that bind them with intentions not of peace but of ensnarement. By bringing them home, people unknowingly open doors they cannot close. These markets are not merely collections of vendors. They are ecosystems of belief and practice. Every seller has their own craft, their own secret rituals, their own reasons for channeling the unseen. Some deal in spells written on paper, others in figurines designed to attract or repel certain forces. There are stalls where potions are sold, claiming to heal illnesses or grant success. But behind these claims lies the darker truth, that such items manipulate energies in ways that are dangerous for both the buyer and the target. The transaction may seem like the solution to a problem, winning someone's heart, defeating an enemy, securing financial gain. But in reality, it binds the soul into an agreement with forces that demand far more in return than anyone anticipates. Another layer of danger is the environment itself. Markets of the occult carry an atmosphere that feels different from ordinary places. The air is thick with incense not used for fragrance but for ritual. Symbols are drawn on walls or etched onto the stalls, not for decoration but for invoking protection, curses, or power. The people walking through may feel a strange mix of fascination and discomfort, sensing that something unseen is alive in the market itself. For those with sensitive hearts, simply spending time in such an environment can be enough to bring about unease, headaches, or an unexplainable heaviness that lingers even after leaving. These are not coincidences but the lingering effects of energies that saturate every corner of the market. Markets of the occult also thrive on secrecy and the promise of control. They lure people by feeding desires that already exist within the human heart, the desire for love, success, power, revenge, or protection. Instead of turning to prayer, faith, or patience, individuals are tempted with quick solutions, shortcuts that bypass morality and divine order. This is why such markets are dangerous not only physically but morally. They nurture the belief that unseen forces can be bent to human will, that one can control destiny through charms and spells rather than surrendering to God's plan. This belief alone is enough to corrode faith, weakening the spiritual shield that protects the soul from harm. Even those who do not buy anything are not entirely safe. Walking through such markets, touching items, or even listening too long to the whispers of the sellers can open the mind to suggestion. Doubt begins to creep in. What if this charm really works? What if this potion really heals? What if this spell really changes life? Such thoughts may seem harmless, but they are the first steps toward entanglement. Darkness often enters not through dramatic encounters, but through subtle seeds planted in moments of weakness or curiosity. Once those seeds are sown, they can grow into obsessions, drawing the person back until they eventually give in. History and culture are filled with examples of such markets. In some places, they are hidden in alleys, only accessible to those who know how to ask. In others they are openly displayed, disguised as cultural centers or traditional bazaars. Regardless of location, their essence remains the same. They are crossroads where human desire meets unseen forces, where souls risk being sold not with contracts or signatures, but with simple purchases made in ignorance. The most alarming truth about markets of the occult is that their influence extends far beyond their stalls. The objects bought there are carried into homes, placed under pillows, worn as jewelry, or kept. Each of these objects becomes a doorway, inviting darkness into the very spaces that should be safe. Families may begin to experience discord, sickness, or unexplainable misfortune, never realizing that the source lies in something they thought was harmless. And the cycle continues, for once the market has claimed one heart, its influence spreads, feeding on few, and the hope of control until the person is deeply entangled. This is why markets of the occult remain among the most treacherous of all places connected with witchcraft. They do not announce themselves with haunted silence or eerie shadows, but with the illusion of choice, the glitter of mystery, and the promise of solutions. Yet behind every item, and every exchange lies the same truth: nothing in such markets comes without a price, and what is lost in the process is often far greater than what is gained.